Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Joel Hunter, host of Power Talks, empowering you through the voice of truth. On today's program, I'm pretty excited about this. We've got Andre Bailey, who is one of the superstars of our region. He is the co-creator of The Collective. We'll find out what that is in just a moment. He was Central Floridian of the Year in 2015. That's a big deal. What do you, is your crown? Did you bring your crown?
No, it's actually, I wear it normally around my neck on a big gold chain, but they said the gold would shine too bright, so I don't have it on today.
Andre is the creator and president at The Collective. Change Everything is the name of the innovative social change accelerator that he founded. And then also Jim Thomas, who Andre says is the big deal, and I happen to know this as a fact. He's the CEO of the Orlando Tech Association and a board member of The Collective. But he's also been in the leadership of the Chamber of Commerce, and we'll talk about some of that as well. So thanks for being on. Andre, long time no see.
I know.
It's been like, what, 2 days or
15 minutes.
All right, first question. I promised them that they would know what The Collective is. What is The Collective, and why did you found it?
So The Collective is all about leadership. I think that's what Jim, who's a good friend of mine, we share in common. We believe that leadership is how you create the future, and the future that you want for your community, for your country, and for your life. And so The Collective was started about a year ago. I started it with a good friend of mine, John Bustecker. Mm-hmm. And we want to bring nonprofit leaders, advocates together to build community and to train the next generation of leaders that are going to make a difference on things that matter. You know this. It's not about necessarily institutions by themselves. Yeah. We have to have leaders and sacrificial leaders if we're going to forge the future for our families.
This is so key, because in my generation, it was about the institutions. It was about the silos and how powerful can the corporation get and all that kind of stuff. This is the greatest thing about this next generation of leadership. It's all about collaboration, learning from each other, social innovation. Golly, I just so admire you guys. And Jim, the Collective is about, by the way, tell us how many are involved in The Collective right now.
So we're about a year old, and we have about 400 leaders who are committed to it. Dr. Hunter, what's fascinating is John and I just started this, and we were like, we'll see if like 2 or 3 people show up.
Oh my goodness.
It was amazing the hunger that leaders have, and a lot of young leaders, for social change. What's also amazing is how people say, and Jim and I talk about this all the time, there's really not a lot out there. If you're dedicated to making a difference in your community, there's not a lot of resources for you. That's why I love Orlando Tech, the organization Jim runs. I think it's very similar to what you were saying a second ago. In a time where institutions are still important, but creating change usually doesn't happen inside of those institutions.
Correct.
Whether you run a nonprofit or whether you're a startup tech company, you gotta have some independent way of being built up and then creating your future.
Well, Jim, we're talking about nonprofits, social change, so on. So tell us about the for-profits. Tell us about the business. You were the head of
the Orlando Regional Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, and it was so great to advocate. I'm originally from Los Angeles and just have fallen in love with Orlando and Central Florida. And to be able to talk with business leaders throughout the 7 counties and say, I don't care where the county line stops. I don't care where the city line stops. We're all in this together, and how can we share that information back and forth? And then how do we look at these new technologies that are coming at us every day, and then how do we use them to make the community better and make our businesses better?
Tell us how can you give us examples of what you've discovered along the way with these, how do you challenge people to upgrade their technology or to share, how does that go?
Well, that was the exciting thing, transitioning from the chamber to really work in that tech space, because we have such a rich tech community here in Central Florida and Orlando, but it's so siloed out, people don't see it for what it collectively is. Mm-hmm. The fact that we're so close to what's happening in space and Space Coast and Brevard County, and bringing all of those folks together, they find really valuable, because there's not these platforms to collaborate. right? And that's why I love when Andre was first starting the collective. I go, that's exactly what we need, is that piece to bring the brain trust of the nonprofit and social enterprise leaders together. And that's what we're doing on the Tech Association side.
So tell us, like, what do you do at the collective? I mean,
We just hang out,
get together.
So it's a year old, and so the first stage of it was just seeing if people had interest and working with other social change leaders and forming a community. You know, you're big on that. I've always really respected, Dr. Hunter, that you see the value in building community where others sometimes don't. You know, Jim and I talk all the time about these overarching, powerful themes in our society that we have to be cognizant of to shape our future. And technology and connection is they're so important to us. But what we've often talked about is this, that in a world that's fully connected in a way we've never been before, when you have connection without community, that equals chaos. When it's amazing that we can pick up our phone right now and hit a few numbers and talk to 15 of our loved ones in just a few seconds, but we don't necessarily know our next door neighbor anymore. We don't know those who are sharing in our struggles, and so we're more connected than ever. But we don't have that community, and I think you're seeing the fringes of our society start to unravel. The collective is about bringing the social change leaders in this community together and saying, we must have community or we're never going to achieve our goals without that.
So do you, Jim, let me direct this to you, because you talked about Los Angeles to Orlando, two communities that have much in common, but they're distinctly different. When you think about the Orlando region, what are the kind of characteristics that come up in your mind that may be unique to this particular context? And then what are some of the relationships you've made that have been very valuable as they've begun to kind of play off each other?
Yeah, and I've said this before, and it's certainly not to badmouth LA at all, but when you sit down with people in Central Florida, I've found that they instantly start talking about the communities that they're in and what they care about and what they do outside of their work. And too often when I was in LA, it was like, hey, I got a screenplay and can you introduce me to this producer? It was all kind of internally focused, and it was just really dominated by the entertainment industry. But here, every conversation we have, it's like, people are like, how do I do more? How do I get involved? And they just don't always know how to plug in. And that's what I love about the platforms that we've put together, is all of a sudden you're like, hey, show up tonight and there's something great and there's going to be great people, and just to see what comes out of that's fantastic.
Do you talk about offerings where everybody can get involved together, or here's what I'm doing, and boy, what do you do?
No, we do. At the collective, what we try to do is balance, a lot like church, we try to balance the individual's needs and what they need now and in the future with what the group needs. So it's this incredible balancing act. We're working right now tentatively with UCF and Valencia to develop a curriculum where if someone says, hey, I want to be a social change leader, but I don't know where to start, we can walk them through a 12-month curriculum where you learn about how to do simple things like fundraising and marketing and general advocacy. But also this curriculum, you'll find this interesting, Dr. Hunter, it really starts with, who are you? Why do you want to do this work? What's important to you? Because I think whether it's tech or whether it's this conversation about the collective, what we're finding in our society is as big and broad and as complicated as things have become, we're realizing that the simple things, our values, who we are on the inside, that if these things are not reconciled, we can never create outward transformation if we do not have internal transformation. And for some people, that's through traditional church, but for others, whether they want to believe in the same faith that you have or that others have, people know there's some questions inside they must answer and reconcile before they're empowered to change their outside world. So the collective, I think a lot of the work Jim is doing is helping these tech entrepreneurs say, hey, okay, so you want to conquer the world with your company, but what are you going to do with your life once you've conquered it?
Let me ask you that, because that brings up a really good point. Tech people are known to be kind of nerdy, or kind of living, kind of in their heads, because they're fascinated with ideas.
Right.
Not usually socially inept, or apt, or whatever that word is. Really capable and known for their social capabilities.
Right.
Living in the tech world and dealing with the tech world, what Andre's saying about, we can't really make a change until it's personal for us. We discovered, this is who I am. This is why I was made. I love this. It's not just a good idea. It's a passion for me. How do you, in dealing with that particular part of the population, is it hard work to get them to see themselves in this and not just separate a good idea and does anybody want to invest in my idea? How do you really engage them personally?
Right. Well, and I think that's, as you're saying, that's the reason why we put an association together, because people are like, well, what does it do and what is it for? And so many, I'm meeting with major tech leaders, and they're not always the CEO, but it's like the CTO or the CIO, the chief tech person in these major multi-thousand person companies. And they go, I've always wanted to get more involved with the nonprofit community. I've always wanted to give back. I have a bunch of skills and resources and talent, but I don't know where to plug in. And then that's where we come and so we say, hey, let's partner with these great folks in town that are already doing stuff. And you can speak, you can talk to student groups, you can do all of these things. And then they're so excited because they want to give and they just haven't always known where to give.
Let me ask, mechanically, how do you make those connections? You mentioned 400 people. You walk into a group of 400 people and all of a sudden you don't know how to make a personal, you may have some friends already there and you may gravitate toward the people you already know. But again, I'm an introvert, believe it or not. So me walking into a room of 400 people and having a personal conversation about what I do, that's really uncomfortable. How do you make that happen?
Well, so my background, as you know, in my early 20s was in church. So I kind of learned from the pros like you that you have to balance pulling in the crowd, and then once the crowd is there, figuring out ways to funnel people down individual paths or through collective paths. So, we're looking at, some of our first meetings, we were drawing people in with Mayor Dyer speaking, and we had someone from the Gates Foundation speaking, and this famous person is coming in to speak. That was the net. But now the real challenge is, how do we get people on a path to personal enrichment and knowledge? At the end of the day, you said something very powerful the other day. We were doing a panel together, and Dr. Hunter I think the question was, what's the one thing you would do different if you could go back to the beginning of your career? And all of us on the panel had an answer, but Dr. Hunter's answer was fascinating. He said, and I'll paraphrase, I wouldn't put as much faith in institutions to create change and the change I wanted to see. I saw that institutions were the only way towards achieving my mission and vision, and I think that was an error on my part. And now this guy left one of the biggest churches in America to start a project that's more based on building the individual and bringing institutions together. That's ultimately got to be the goal. If you're a leader and your only mission is to get a crowd and get selfies so you look cool on the internet, or if you're a church leader and your only goal is to have a big congregation, I think you've missed the whole point. Exactly. It's ultimately about, how do you, in that one person, create transformation in a way that empowers that person to then, on their own journey, change the world. So I think that's the balancing act we're looking to find.
That's really good. Jim, let me ask you a personal question. So we're talking about, getting out of our headspace and actually into real personal relationships. Were you always wired to work with other people? You're an extrovert, or are you most excited when you're hearing other people's ideas? What about what you're doing really fits who you are?
Well, and what you just said and your point from the other day really resonated with me. The first part of my career, I worked in local, state, and federal politics and government for over 11 years. And I had faith in the institutions would get us there. And it was just after 10 plus years where I said, I don't know if the institution is going to get us there, but the people will. Let me back up. So I love sitting around and talking about ideas, and the idea that I got to do that starting in my early 20s was just an amazing, because working in politics, you need to know a little bit about everything. Yeah. You have to be able to talk the language. But to be able to then pull back and say, hey, if we can get people and communities moving these directions, the institutions will follow.
Yeah.
Right.
Andre, exactly. And I think what you're saying reminds me of Andre, you've had both a state, you've had a regional impact, of course, but you also are coaching other communities in our state. You've had a national presence as well, working with folks in Los Angeles on homelessness, and because that's part of your expertise. Do you sense in our culture, I mean, you've got this broad view of the shifts and the trends of the culture. Do you sense in the culture that people are more ready to associate with people who are not exactly like them or not in the same place that they are? I mean, on the one hand, everybody says that we're breaking down and tribalizing into little affinity groups. On the other hand, I see you guys and you're getting everybody together. So which is it?
So for those that don't know, my bigger company is called Change Everything. It does the collective. It does Lead Homelessness, which is a national homeless initiative, working with communities across the country on the model that Jim and you and others were involved with here on homelessness. I previously ran the Central Florida Commission on Homelessness. But one of the big ideas of my Change Everything initiative is that America, our country, sits in a fascinating position right now in 2018. And that is, we are the richest country that's ever existed, the most powerful country that's ever existed in the history of the world. But yet, there's this growing sense of unease in our society. If you look at the suicide rates, that's been a conversation that's been talked about a lot lately. The suicide rate is, I believe, 30% higher than it was 10 years ago. There was a report that came out last week that 65% of Americans are unhappy on a daily basis. Wow. And this is in the most prosperous country, again, that's ever existed. I'll tell you this. Our society's reaching a place where we know that this is not the destination, that just wealth, just comfort, just our life being easy isn't giving us the fulfillment that we really on the inside feel like we need. And that's why I think, to your point, there's a hunger for people to get involved in new groups, to try new directions for their life, because we realize this, we're in the place where everything should feel right as a society, as a community, but we feel like, because externally, there's more than we've ever had, but internally, we feel like something's missing. I think that's why you open the doors and you say, hey, we're gonna do a collective, and hundreds of people show up. That's why Orlando Tech, hey, I know you're out there, you're gonna be the next Steve Jobs, the next Mark Zuckerberg, and you don't need us, you're gonna be a billionaire, but hey, if you wanna come to our meeting, and you can't keep the doors open long enough for them all to come in. Right.
Tell us a little bit, thank you, this is brilliant. Tell us a little bit about what Orlando Tech does.
So the first one, and we've just, in the past year, we've really broadened out our mission. So now we're all of Central Florida, the 7 counties, 4.3 million people, one of the greatest tech regions in the whole country. The diversity is just amazing to see space and simulation in so many of these global leading industries that we have here. So we bring those tech leaders together so they have kind of a mentor peer group, so they know how to build more, create more jobs and have more success in their companies. But then we connect them with the startup and scaling piece. And so they can give that 20 and 30-year career advice and tech advice to these kids that are coming, leaving college and coming up. And then we partner with the community folks to say, hey, you're doing such great work in the community. How do we, from the tech side, help elevate your mission?
Let me dig a little bit deeper there. When you say, you take these young folks and you kind of give them the advice that of the startups,
Right.
What you need to know. What are some of those elements? What do you tell them?
To the leaders, or the leaders to the startups?
What are the leaders say to the startups?
Right. I think that we recently had an event that was just amazing, where we had MJ Swallow, who's who's at UCF, created this program called CREAL. It's the Lasers and Photonics Cluster. Got all of that going. One of his students, who got his PhD, was Jason Eichenholz, who started a company, who had a 20-year overnight success, is now a global leader in autonomous technology. And so they are able to share that piece. Autonomous, and then it's actually the LiDAR piece, which helps future cars, self-driving cars.
I just nodded like I know.
I knew it was only a matter of time before he said something. I go, what?
So the cars, 36,000 people a year die on the roads in the U.S. And this technology theoretically could bring that number down to zero. And it's happening in Orlando's backyard.
Oh my
They've
goodness.
hired over 200 people in the last year. So we bring folks like that together with 200 plus folks will come from the community just to hear what their experience, what the trials and tribulations over their career, and all of a sudden now they're able to talk to them afterwards. They have real relationships, and so that's just a piece of what we do on an ongoing basis.
Andre, let me ask you the same question. What would you say to, and you run into a lot of these, young entrepreneurs? They really want their lives to matter. They want to have social impact. They also want their businesses to be healthy. How do you counsel folks? What do you say? These are some of the basics you can't leave out.
So to me, the message is pretty simple. We have in our culture taught people to have a plan for their personal success. And that's okay. Listen, again, this is the richest country that's ever existed. You can be successful, and that's a great thing. But you have to tell young leaders, if you have a plan for success, but you do not have a plan for significance for your life, then you're going to miss out on the most important part of your world and the part that ultimately will give you the most fulfillment. And so this is why Jim and I are friends, this is why we work together well. That's the new message. It's not necessarily about sacrificing everything and becoming a modern day Mother Teresa and giving it all up. If you want to do that, that's great. You can have a successful tech company. You can be successful somewhere in the community and make money for your family and do well. But if you don't have that strategy to make a difference on homelessness or poverty or be involved in the arts or be a part of your community in a big way, you're going to get to the end of your life and realize you missed the most important part.
Yeah, and this is almost a rhetorical question, but I take it both of you have found that community is absolutely necessary for that person to be encouraged in finding significant things and being sustained in that kind of action. Yeah. Because without that, you kind of default back into your own deal.
We all lose our minds by ourselves, and I mean, I can speak for myself. When I don't have good people around me, I just become, I'm prone to delusion already. but when I have no one around me to say, hey, Andre, that whole idea you have, that's probably, you might want to consider moving it this direction. I think community is something that is so important to who we are that this is why, again, organizations like Orlando Tech, the Collective, what you're doing on homelessness and family homelessness, what your solution, which is amazingly profound and simple. Hey, there's thousands of churches. Why don't we talk to each other? Yeah. and there's needs. Maybe we can try to come up with a plan to work together. Yeah. So there's something profound about how we take our individual skills, we morph them together in community, and then everything else makes sense.
Yeah. So Jim, last question. You got about a minute. Who is your community? Who keeps you going? Who's your your peer group that says, man, I want to hang around them because every time I'm around them, I come away excited and smarter.
Yeah, I think it's to me it's two-sided. The idea that we have folks that want to come together and give their time, that have been in their industries for 20 and 30 years, and they want to do nothing but be able to share that with young, tech leaders coming up. That just inspires me because they're not doing it. They're just not doing it for the money. If that's what they are focused on, they wouldn't show up at the meetings. They're not getting anything other than giving that contribution back. And both Andre and I, we both could be out making a lot more money than we're doing now. There's things if financial
we're
wealth.
going to take up the collection at the end here.
Good.
No,
there we go. But you go like that's that piece of significance and finding that significance for ourselves and then being able to share that and inspire others and be inspired by others that's what it all comes back to.
Dr. Hunter, the quality of your commitment is only measured by the depth of your sacrifice. The quality of your commitment is only measured by the depth of your sacrifice. That's why I love the people he works with at Orlando Tech, the people at the Collective. They're bound together by a common mission that then they're sacrificing for in a way that knits them together. And I think that's where community comes together in that moment of being bound together for a common cause.
Yeah. So, and just the Collective.
Go to Facebook and put in the Collective, put in Andre Bailey, Andrae Bailey. All the information's there. We'd love to have people be a part. You can apply if you're a nonprofit leader, a social change advocate. We'd love to have you be a part of the Collective. It will change your life and others' lives.
Amen. We're out of time. I hate this because I was just getting interested. No, we were just getting going. I love these guys. I love what they're doing. Because they're a part of what I do believe is happening into our entire culture. We are coming to the level of maturity where we say, I need other people. I was made for relationships. I won't operate to my maximum without those relationships. I was made to give myself away, and that's where I'm going to find fulfillment. And that's what these two live out. Because it's not just about money or traditional forms of success. And so I would urge you to consider those things in your own life. Thanks to Andre and Jim for joining us on Power Talks. Remember, these discussions are just that, discussions among us. We'd love to see you continue the discussions at home. Go one step further, get involved, go to Facebook, access a Collective. Because when Power Talks, you're empowered through the voice of truth. See you next time.